Savior's soul. Now that Saturday's gone.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. We're in Melbourne, where it's relatively dry at the moment. We're going to start proceedings soon, so if you'd like to start making your way to your seats and your tables, we'll be getting started shortly.
About 2,000 miles from here. Such a tough enchilada filled up with nada, giving what you gotta give to get a dollar bill. Used to be a limber chick and times have been a tick, and now she's finger licking to the man with the money in his pocket, flying in his rocket, only stopping by on his way to a better world. If Taylor finds a better world, then Taylor's gonna run away. Sometimes I wake up with the sadness, other days it feels like madness. So what would I do without you? When colors turn to shades of gray, with the weight of the world at the end of the day, what would I do without you? A decade goes by without a warning, and there's still a kindness in your eye. Amidst the questions and the worry, a peace of mind always takes me by surprise. I feel like I'm walking with eyes as blind as a man without a lantern in a coal mine. What would I do without you? My imagination gets the best of me.
This is your slightly sterner call to make your way to your seats before I get very schoolmistress on you.
A guilty soul and a worried mind. I will never make it if I'm on my own.
Okay. Good morning, distinguished guests, people in the room and online, waving to the camera there, charismatic megafauna, every one of you, welcome here today to the 2022 Celebrating Women in Conservation Breakfast, proudly presented by Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage Australia. Now, do we have the tables here from Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage? Give us a wave. Where are you guys? They're the hosts, so they're behaving very nicely. So welcome on behalf of them. My name is Tanya Ha, and I'm delighted to be your MC this morning. Now, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians upon whose land this event is taking place. I would also like to pay respect to the elders, both present, past, and the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous people who are here with us today. We recognise that the remarkable Australian environment that we here are striving to conserve is on stolen land. Now, we were hoping to have Uncle Ricky, our Wurundjeri elder, joining us today for a welcome to country, but he's had to go into isolation. These are the times that we're living in. We are hoping to have Wurundjeri man Alex Kerr with us sometime today as well. And we do extend our best wishes to Uncle Ricky. Now, this morning we're here to celebrate the important role that women and people who identify as women play in protecting our incredible, beautiful natural environment. Now, I'm really excited to be part of this. I'm always very excited to be part of this event. It's my favourite event of the year because it brings together the cream of the crop in conservation fields. It brings together, women in conservation and their supporters and champions. In fact, are there any men in the room here today? Give us a wave. You are very welcome too. Thank you for being here and showing your support. And look, traditionally this is a networking event, and I will draw your attention to the booklets that you have on your tables which tell you who's here and who you might like to meet today if you're here in person. But I think also this year it's going to be a little bit of a support group, because this year, we're thinking of war in Ukraine. There are also deadly floods in New South Wales and Queensland. And just a couple of days ago, yet another gut-wrenching IPCC report came out. In fact, if you look at the climate record of the entire planet and assign a colour for whether the global average has been cooler, to give that different shades of blue depending on how much cooler than average, or warmer in red colours, then you end up with a trend that looks a bit like this. And because I'm a woman in conservation, I sowed this, because that's the kind of thing that we do. But don't give me a clap. I'm not here to show off my sewing skills, but thank you though. And look, I just wanted to sort of acknowledge that this is a time, and we know in coming years, that the support, it's not just networking and career building and making connections, it really is support, sometimes a shoulder to cry on, and sometimes the reminder that there are inspirational, good people out there doing great work that really keeps us putting one foot in front of the other, in spite of the bad news that we see on TV. So today I really wanted to put in a heartfelt acknowledgement of that we're not necessarily all in a great place, but we are really pleased to be here together. This is the first time in a couple of years. We were meeting online last year. We extend that welcome to people online and recognise that they're in different places, not necessarily able to join us, but very much that connection is still there. It is still strong, and it is still really important. Now, as I'm kind of inclined to, I like to just give you a bit of a sample of the kind of names that you'll find in this book. And this is when some people get slightly nervous about whether or not their name is going to get called out. But I really do think it is important to highlight different inspirational people. Let's start off with, is Dominic Hess here? She's probably hiding if I know Dominic. She is a researcher originally from University of Melbourne, now zero carbon building lead at City of Melbourne. And she's the co-author of a beautiful book called Designing for Hope. And if you meet Dominic, then she's someone that I'm starting off mentioning her, because I think that one of the things that women often bring to conservation and climate change action is a combination of a strong head and a strong heart. It's having evidence on our side, but also having the compassion to pursue these things that we know we need to pursue. I'm going to play sort of kind of a, rather than 6 degrees of separation, 1 degree of separation. So I'm going to link together the next few names. So Dominic Hess used to be at the Thrive Research Hub at University of Melbourne. Someone else who's at University of Melbourne is Associate Professor Jen Martin. Are you here, Jen? Is there a wave somewhere? So Jen is, she is someone who has a conservation, a field biology background. She runs lots of citizen science projects looking after wildlife, but now she is teaching science communication at the University of Melbourne. She's an absolute legend, and that it's really valuable that people in environmental and conservation science and climate change science are able to communicate the really important work that they're doing. So I'm going to, the other thing I wanted to mention too about Jen is that she is a board member of the Australian Dark Sky Alliance. And that is a group that's interested in reducing light pollution, which astrophysicists don't like, but also a whole lot of wildlife don't like. It disrupts some of the migration patterns of birds and moths, and there's other impacts. And in fact, bogong moths in particular can get their flight paths distracted. And that's really, a big problem for mountain pygmy possums, which rely on bogong moths for their diet. And that's a critically endangered species that's quite valuable to Victoria, and also a species that is being looked after and researched by the team at Zoos Victoria. Where are the Zoos Victoria people? Wait there. Thank you, guys. We also have Jenny Gray, CEO, is here today. She's the CEO of Zoos Victoria, and she's a past speaker. So not only are they working on efforts to save mountain pygmy possums, many other species, such as partnerships with regional centres, Parks Victoria, Phillip Island Nature Trust, who I gather they're joining us online at Phillip Island. And they're working together looking after the eastern barred bandicoot, and they've now had some re-releases of these restored species into French Island. So that's been some good news that we've had over the last year, has been that some of the conservation efforts are working. Now, speaking of conservation, where's the Australian Conservation Foundation table? You're normally the really noisy table when I call you out. Maybe it was that sobering introduction that I gave. Welcome to you guys. And also, I wanted to particularly have a shout out and say hi to the teams from the Department of Environment, Land, Water, and what's the P stand for? Planning, that's right, DELP. I'm just so used to, mental blank, I need more coffee. I'm so used to DELP rolling off the tongue, and the teams from Parks Victoria. Where are you guys? Give us a wave. They're always very polite because they know their minister's going to arrive any moment. So, but yes, welcome to you. And I particularly wanted to acknowledge the teams from the Department and Parks Victoria, because they've had an incredible year. Bushfires earlier on, and storms, floods, if not floods of water, it's floods of tourists when Melbourne opens up. So it's been a particularly unpredictable year for these teams, and they've really risen to the occasion to provide that access to nature that people so badly need, while also protecting the natural environment. And apart from everyone here in the room at Zinc, I've already, keep looking to the camera because I really do want to acknowledge the people that are joining us online. That includes the amazing team from Nature Conservancy Australia, our friends at the Conservation Ecology Centre at Cape Otway, and as I mentioned, the incredible staff and volunteers from Phillip Island Nature Parks. Now, give everyone a round of applause here today because I've just picked out a few, but really, I think everyone has found the last few years challenging, but the work that we do is so important, and so I really think it's, I can't help but start by acknowledging it. Now, in the lead up to International Women's Day on March the 8th, it's fitting that we recognise the contribution of women here and around the world who are leading the charge to protect our natural environment and bring balance back to our ecosystems and confront the climate crisis. This year's United Nations International Women's Day theme is very aptly Gender Equality, Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. And this theme is anchored to the UN Commission on the Status of Women 2022 priority theme, Achieving Gender Equality and the Empowerment of All Women and Girls in the context of climate change, environmental and natural disaster risk reduction policies, and programs. Now, gender equity and climate crisis, they're two quite inseparable issues, and they're facing today's society here and around the world. Women are disproportionately impacted by threats to the environment and the devastating consequences of climate change, particularly in developing nations. But every day, inspiring and resilient women are at the forefront of protecting our planet. And it is our differences, our empathy, our spirit, and occasionally our sewing skills that make our role not only important but absolutely vital if we are going to have the impact needed in this decade and beyond. Women, girls and gender diverse people are effective and powerful leaders and change makers, and their participation and leadership in conservation results in more effectual action. I'd now like to invite one absolute legend in the environment, a very fantastic female leader, Trust for Nature's Vic Miles, the first of our CEO addresses today. Welcome, Vic.
Thanks very much, Tanya. Can you hear me okay? So, good morning, everyone. As Tanya said, I'm Vic Miles, CEO, Trust for Nature. And to begin with, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting, the members of the Kulin Nation, especially the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people. I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and to any other elders that we might have from other communities here today. I'd also like to begin by acknowledging what's happening around the world, in Ukraine, and for that matter, close to home in Queensland and northern New South Wales. Obviously, there's a lot happening around us. Today, as we celebrate the role and contribution of women in conservation in the lead up to International Women's Day, of course, it is completely surreal to be standing here in front of you, because this time in 2020, I think was probably the last time I, anyway, was with such a large group of people. It was literally probably a week or so before the whole world shut down. And although we have had 2 years in a lockdown, and that's been very challenging, I'm sure, for all of us and for all our organisations, we have found new ways to connect with our supporters in conservation. And today, it is really thrilling to be able to say that there are probably 200 or more people joining us via a live stream from around Australia, and last year, nearly 800 people. So we find ways, and I think that's a terrific thing. Over the last 2 years, again, as we moved from lockdown to lockdown, myself, I really began to appreciate the nature that I was experiencing anyway, from nature strips to gardens, to parks, to find everything that was around me. But of course, I really missed the opportunity to go out and see what was happening around the wonderful state of Victoria, and for that matter, around Australia, to see what conservation was happening and the inspirational work that many of you are doing or supporting. And on that, I would now like to welcome not only the Friends of Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage, but also many of you here today who are protecting and supporting conservation of our plants, our animals, our habitats and our landscapes. Thank you all very much for your support. Next week, I will be attending the Australian Land Conservation Alliance Private Land Conference. And I bring this up not only because it's going to be a fantastic event, and I would encourage many of you to again join online. It's virtual, and there are tickets still available, but because of its theme, and its theme is recover, restore and redouble. That's exactly what we need to do, and it's a recognition of the quality and the impact that private land conservation is having here in Australia, and the role that we can all play in protecting our environment, given the intersection between our social, financial and environmental systems. And I'd also like to, it will be a chance for us to collectively, I think, reinvigorate what it is to understand the impact that private land has on protecting our biodiversity. Now this year, very special year for Trust for Nature. Amazingly, Trust for Nature is going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary. That is a very significant milestone, let me say, for any conservation organisation around the world. 50 years is a long time. And we'll be able to celebrate the journey that we've been on. And obviously when you look back at what happened in 1972 and the fact that Trust for Nature was animated, if you like, by just 2 people, and how it's grown in that time. And for those of us who work there, we're lucky to be there and to be able to animate that organisation for the time that we're there. But it's also going to be an opportunity for us to look to the future and to think about what does conservation mean 2022 going forwards? How does it look different to how it looked 50 years ago? How do we look here in Australia and across the world at the new perspectives that we need to bring and the new practices that are going to happen as we move towards protecting even more of nature? And a big part of this evolution is going to be how First Peoples connect with and steward their country. And we certainly look forward to partnering with traditional owners of the land as we go forward from 2022 onwards. Again, as I look forward, I'm always drawn to the vision of the trust, a future in which nature is protected, valued and thriving. And I'm really sure that that's a vision that we all share. Thank you so much for coming this morning.
Thank you, Vic. It's always a sign of someone who spends a lot of time in nature that they off-road off the stage rather than taking the stairs. We love you, Vic. Now, a quick note before we dive into breakfast. We have some great prizes on offer this morning, including accommodation vouchers for some beautiful eco-friendly retreats around Victoria. And I'm pleased to say that every guest, both here at Zinc and watching online, have automatically been entered into the draw to win. We will randomly draw our winners at the conclusion of the event, so make sure you stick around until 9 a.m. Now, the Zinc team are going to commence the breakfast service, so we'll return to our speakers soon. But in the meantime, if you want to share photos or insights from today's event, do share the love on social media, and you can use the hashtag CWICB 2022. So that's for Celebrating Women in Conservation Breakfast, CWICB 2022. Share the love beyond the room. Enjoy breakfast. We'll be back with you soon. Gee, it's like magic, that glass and cutlery. It just works every time. Welcome back, everyone. Continuing my little theme of pointing out, interesting people in the room that you might get a chance to meet today. I happened to notice that one of the people who, when I went back to university and I did my master's, taught me everything I know about social research. Rebecca is here. Hi, Rebecca Ford. An expert in human environment interactions and now with Skills Australia, is that right? Skills Standards. Still with the university, so still teaching as well. So, hi, Rebecca. Another interesting person in the room, we have Elizabeth Finkel AM, who is an award-winning science journalist, science writer, best-selling author, all these different things. Wonderful person, and I just thought I'd say, Elizabeth, I actually asked the sound people to play some Ella Fitzgerald every now and then, just for you. So, welcome. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Which I've gone the wrong page now. Where am I up to? Yes. Before we hear from our speakers, we have a couple more special guests. Now, we've got a principal event partner, NAB. Where's the NAB table? They're all well behaved as well. Very good. I'd now have great pleasure in introducing Soraya Dean, the head of NAB Ready Together, NAB's Disaster Resilience Program. Please make her welcome to address you.
Thank you, Tanya. I'd like to add my acknowledgements to the traditional owners, the Wurundjeri and Bunurong people of the Kulin Nations, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and those in the room and online today. I'd also like to acknowledge the Honourable Minister, Lily D'Ambrosio, Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change, Bush Heritage Australia, Trust for Nature, a valued NAB customer, and our keynote speakers, Linh Do and Victoria McKenzie-McHarg. Good morning. My name's Soraya and I'm the head of NAB Ready Together, the bank's disaster resilience program. As others have already mentioned, isn't it fantastic to have some of us in the room at a real life event talking to real life people for International Women's Day? Woo! It's certainly been a while since I was at an industry event, and it's an absolute pleasure. NAB is proud to sponsor the Women in Conservation Breakfast for the 8th year in a row. Given all the uncertainty and challenges of a global pandemic, floods in New South Wales and Queensland, and the unfolding conflict in Ukraine, these events where we can connect and celebrate leadership for positive social change are just so vital. This year's IWD theme, Gender Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow, elevates the role that women and diverse people play in combating environmental challenges like protecting and strengthening landscapes and ecosystems. NAB recognises that our future depends on acting now for the long term. That's why we value the vital work of the environmental and conservation sectors and are honoured to continue supporting you to champion sustainability in your networks and communities. This is also critical for us. As the nation's largest agribusiness bank, we're invested in the success of a regenerated Australia. Just last month, NAB and technology partner Downforce Technologies completed a successful pilot to scale up technology to remotely measure soil carbon levels with customers. This technology helps land managers better understand past and potential carbon in their soil, allowing them to make better decisions about increasing soil carbon storage. It enables businesses to enhance their resilience and move closer to being carbon neutral or even carbon positive production. Through NAB Ready Together, the program that I lead, we aim to support Australians before, during and after natural disasters, while building environmental resilience as well. Our new Environmental Resilience Fund will build insights and test new ways to reduce fire and flood risk by leveraging nature-based solutions. Looking at the floods in Queensland and New South Wales is a stark reminder about why this matters. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this event as you play a key role in advocating for a sustainable future. I'm looking forward to learning from the great female leaders in environmental action who are speaking at this event today, from government, civil society and academia. Coming from the private sector, I believe that cross-sector approaches to big societal challenges like climate change, biodiversity loss and disaster risk reduction are vital. These problems are too big for any one sector to tackle alone. So thank you Bush Heritage Australia and Trust for Nature for having the foresight to bring us together for this important conversation. I encourage you all in this room and online to actively participate in the discussion and wring as many insights as you can from the talented and inspiring women on the panel, online and in the room with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Soraya. I'd now like to introduce the Honourable Lily D'Ambrosio, Victorian Minister for Energy, Environment and Climate Change. Welcome, Minister.
Good morning, everybody. I preferred Katrina and the Waves, but that was the introductory music earlier. So look, thank you very much, and good morning to you, and thank you very much, Tanya, for your welcome. And my beginning is with an acknowledgement to the traditional owners of the land on which we are situated, and that is the people of the Wurundjeri clans, and my respects go to all of their elders of the past, present and emerging, and any who may be here amongst us today. My acknowledgements also go to Senator Janet Rice, to Victoria Miles, CEO of Trust for Nature, Heather Campbell, CEO of Bush Heritage, Victoria McKenzie-McHarg, Strategic Director, Women's Environment Leadership Australia, to Linh Do, Director of Leaders for Global Sustainability, University of Melbourne. And it's a bit... well, it's very exciting being in a room full of so many people, and being women is fantastic. And I do want to acknowledge that it's a little bit scary right here at the moment because there are so many of us packed together. But anyway, we'll get used to that. And I know that we are in a stronger position now to be able to do this. And get back to something that resembles normality for all of us. And I know that we've all very much looked forward to coming to this event for that very reason, and to be able to really just eye each other, shake a hand or kiss a cheek, whatever it was that you did when you first saw each other. And that's a wonderful thing, because we know that that connection, that connectedness is so vital to all of the things that we join together with to celebrate today, and to acknowledge as being particularly important to women as we drive significant change globally in the environmental space. And having women at the forefront at every step we know is critical to success. And I really do want to take up that theme that was talked about earlier about cross-sectoral approaches, and the fact is that we need to all pull together to be able to achieve the things that are ahead of us is no more true. It's as true today as it ever has been, frankly, and it's becoming truer as the days go by. And it's not about how much money individual organisations put in, but it's about optimising the leveraging impact that you can actually have by pooling together all resources, whether they are financial resources, whether they are just people on the ground resources, boots in the field, however you want to put it. Our environment now is at such a precarious stage that we have to try different approaches to be able to really make the strides that we need to be able to have a planet that we can be proud of, and our roles on it. So at a government level, women very much are forging the way to, in terms of the conduct of research, to managing projects, engaging with industry and communities, and creating important legislation. And the majority of members of Victoria's first independent expert panel that advised our government on our ambitious emissions reduction targets for our state, most of those were women. My department, together with the Clean Energy Council, have recently led the creation of the Chloe Munro Scholarship for Transformational Leadership. The award associated with that recognises the enormous contribution made by the late Chloe Munro and supports the ambition of the next wave of female leaders in Australia in the clean energy and carbon space. At a grassroots level, women are working tirelessly to protect our precious environment and unique biodiversity. Some of you will also, of course, recall Victoria's first and only female Premier, that is, Joan Kirner, who joined forces with the Victorian Farmers Federation President Heather Mitchell to create Landcare 35 years ago. This small organisation, of course, has grown into an international movement spanning more than 20 different countries and over 700 groups in Victoria alone. Now, that's a massive legacy that these women have created. Last year, I had the honour of presenting the 2021 Victorian Landcare Awards. The awards recognised Tess Greaves, Regional Landcare Coordinator for the North Central Region, who has led the annual Chicks in the Sticks Rural Women's event, yes, addressing a diverse range of environmental issues since 2013. And of course, we've got to have fun on the way, don't we? So Chicks in the Sticks, a really fantastic program that Tess led. Other incredible women, of course, that were recognised last year included June Johnston for her efforts to rehabilitate Creswick Creek, and Nina Earle for her 22 years of environmental volunteering. These are just some of the extraordinary things women are doing for conservation. Preserving and enhancing our natural environment is an essential function of government, and we have made as a government an historic commitment to halt the decline of our native plants and animals and improve our natural environment through our 20-year plan Protecting Victoria's Environment, Biodiversity 2037. The government's invested nearly $500 million into our precious biodiversity since we were elected at the end of 2014. So it's the largest ever investment by a Victorian government. Is it enough? No. There's a lot more to be done. But the important thing here, of course, is that the investment and the support includes support for the important work led by women and men in bushfire biodiversity recovery in eastern Victoria following the devastation of the Black Summer bushfires just 2 years ago. And I know that this year's International Women's Day theme is Changing Climates, Equality Today for a Sustainable Tomorrow. Globally, our climate has warmed by 1.2 degrees Celsius since reliable records began in 1910. So 1.2 degrees in 112 years. We are already seeing reduced rainfall, more bushfire danger days and longer bushfire seasons, and of course more devastating storm events, and of course flooding, which of course our Wales and Queensland right now are trying to grapple with. So of course all of this tells us quite clearly we can't afford to wait, and absolutely in Victoria we understand the need to take action as quickly as we can. So to tackle climate change, this government has set up a roadmap to net zero emissions by 2050 and cutting our emissions in half by 2030. We've already achieved a 25%, more than a 25% reduction in emissions on 2005 levels by 2020. In terms of some of these actions and the strategy behind our climate change efforts, we've got some concrete actions and funding of almost $2 billion across all major emitting sectors of the economy. Our land use change and forestry pledge will see up to 30 million trees and shrubs planted and on degraded land restored. This groundbreaking pledge will also deliver massive social, economic and environmental benefits, including carbon storage, enhanced biodiversity, healing of country for traditional owners, for and by traditional owners, and improved water and air quality. I was also pleased to have announced earlier this year a major step forward in ensuring Victoria is ready to respond to the risks and opportunities of a changing climate through the Victorian Government's adaptation action plans. This includes integrating climate change adaptation into natural resource management and planning through the Natural Environment Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan. Very soon I'll also be releasing our refresh of the Biodiversity Plan, Biodiversity 2037, because of course we can't set 20-year plans in stone. They've got to keep responding to a changing environment, and so it is meant to be a very dynamic document and set of goals, but also one that is backed by a step up of effort and forming new partnerships as we hopefully meet all of those goals. So as we celebrate International Women's Day, we celebrate the women who will continue the good work to protect our environment and tackle global issues like climate change. So thank you very much for this morning and the opportunity to say a few words, and I wish you great conversation today and great spirits, and hopefully it will recharge all of us for the year ahead. So best wishes again.
Thank you, Minister. And look, I must say, Walking on Sunshine by Katrina and the Waves, that would be great walk-on music for you, especially given your history of solar energy announcements. So perfect for walking on sunshine. Yeah. Now on to our keynote speaker, the wonderful Victoria, or Vic, McKenzie-McHarg, the double mix. Victoria is passionate about the power of women's collaborative leadership to create systemic social change. She has led community-driven campaigns for government action on climate change, working with some of Australia's leading NGOs and progressive businesses. She is currently the Strategic Director of the new Women's Environmental Leadership Australia organisation. You should follow them on Twitter. We'll plug that later. And has previously held roles as Manager of Strategy and Planning at Bank Australia, Chair of the Climate Action Network Australia, and as Climate Campaign Manager at the Australian Conservation Foundation and Environment Victoria. Please make her welcome.
Thank you so much, Tanya, and thank you all for having me here today. It's a total buzz to be in this room with you all and with so many people. I want to start by acknowledging that we're meeting on Wurundjeri country and pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge anybody joining us in the room. Thank you, Minister, for your comments here today, and a huge thank you to Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature for hosting us. This is, Tanya said before, this is the highlight of the conservation calendar, and it was 2 years ago an honour to be sitting with you here at the back of the room and going, so what's this, where are we going, what's going to happen in this coming period? And to know that it's taken this long to get back together is quite astounding, but so exciting. And exciting to be doing this as we're celebrating women in conservation and celebrating the leadership that you all show and that you all bring to this space. I also want to acknowledge that we are joined by a group of women who are in this room who've also been at this a really long time, because our voices are able to be heard because of the work that some of you and people both in the room and some of you online have been doing for decades. And the fact that I can stand here and be confidently using my voice and speaking on a platform like this is part of your legacy. And this is the work that you have done. And we have come a long way. Hearing the Minister talk about the fact that the task force on emissions reduction was majority women, that is a very, very long way from a time where women had to leave the public service when they got married. And some of those women are in this room. So I acknowledge you and I thank you for your dedication to this work over many, many decades. In acknowledging that, though, it is tough to be gathering to celebrate International Women's Day
this week. And we acknowledge that particular day is next week, so perhaps we'll be feeling a little better by then. But it's been a heck of a time. When we look around the world and we see what's happening in the Ukraine, and we see an example as only part of a very complex conflict situation, but where global dominance of fossil fuels is exacerbating conflict once again, where extreme toxic masculinity is on display for the whole world with devastating consequences. We come back to Australia and we see the realities of climate change playing forth in New South Wales and Queensland. Our colleagues, our friends are being rescued as we sit here today from the impacts of climate change. This is astounding that this is happening today. And earlier this week, we had the release of the IPCC report, which has been mentioned. But again, this should not be surprising to us. I want to say that report was devastating, and yet it should not have been. I started working in this field 15 years ago, and it was one of my first acts when I started working at Environment Victoria. It was late 2007, and at that time, the latest IPCC report had just been released, and full of enthusiasm and readiness to change the world, I was like, well, I'm going to get across this and then we're going to do something. So I got the report and I sat down and I read it on a Saturday, and I got halfway through and I was in tears. So I got a box of tissues and a bottle of gin, which may or may not have been the best coping strategy at that time. And I finished that report and I was devastated. But I did think, well, there it is. It's in black and white. We are on this now. We are going to do something. And yet here I stand 15 years later and go, what happened? What's going on here? But the answer to me is actually quite a simple one. This is not just a biodiversity and a climate crisis. This is a leadership crisis that we are facing in Australia and globally. And so the question now is for us, as women leaders and as allies in this space, what are we going to do and how are we going to turn this around? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what my journey through this work has been and how that's landed me at WELA, at Women's Environmental Leadership Australia. And I want to talk to you about that work because I want to invite you to join us on it. Because, spoiler alert, you are our target audience. I mentioned before I started in this work about 15 years ago, and I have been supported in my career. I've had a bit of a dream run, really, working with incredible men and women who have supported me at every turn to learn, to grow, to be challenged, and it's been a ride. And I really, it would be remiss for me not to acknowledge the support I've had, in particular from Kelly O'Shannessy, the CEO of the Australian Conservation Foundation, who I worked with at EV and again at ACF and continues to mentor me today. So thank you so much, Kelly. And I've learnt both within the not-for-profit space, within grassroots networks, and then more recently taking a turn in the progressive business space. And again, a shout out to my colleagues, my former colleagues from Bank Australia, who are also in the room here today. Hello up the back there. And change within that business space, how to think about the different pathways. But despite these incredible experiences and wonderful support around me, I still found myself feeling really quite frustrated. I felt like the way that I was working wasn't as impactful as was needed or as I needed to be. And I felt like the way that I was being asked to lead in particular situations or scenarios and in some space for me, I felt like I was being forced to operate in a way that I didn't always think was the best or to me, the most strategic. And so I felt I needed to step back. So I went and I spoke to a whole lot of people, some of you in this room here today, and I went and met with at least 30 different leaders, CEOs, chairs, senior leaders across a whole range of organisations and sectors, in politics, government, academia, NGOs, business, corporates. I wanted to ask, what do you think change looks like? what are the levers for change, and are you pulling them? And if you're not, why not? What are the barriers holding back that leadership and that change? And I learned a whole lot through that process, as you can imagine. But one of the things that I observed, which is probably not a huge surprise to you, was that despite the diversity that I thought I was looking for in this, I was meeting with people in formal leadership roles, and many of them looked the same. They were largely white, they were largely middle-aged and middle class, and they were largely male. Now that's on one level not wildly surprising when we think about what these formal roles in Australia look like today. But there was also a type of leadership that you either fit or you didn't. And again, for those who are sort of studied in this area, this is not surprising, that the qualities of leadership are very, very normed in a sort of a traditional sense. And when we talk about leadership, it's traditionally been seen as very masculine, as heroic and normative, and it encourages self-reliance and competition and assertiveness. And that model of leadership has been developed through Western culture and handed down through military and political leadership over millennia, and has been written and refined and handed down by men to men in a process that continues today. And it only takes a quick look at the number of books on leadership at your local bookshop written by men to know that that is still a really dominant thought process. So the way this plays out then in our organisations is that if you're not seen to embody those characteristics, there's a real risk that you're not going to be seen as a future leader. That's a huge problem, clearly, for equity and for diversity, but also for our environment and our climate. Because a quick look back at the last 15 years, at a minimum, shows us that the people and the leadership styles that got us into this mess are not going to be the people and the leadership styles that get us out of this mess. We need change, and it needs to be a change of leadership. So that forces the question about what would a different set of people, and here I'm speaking specifically, what would it look like if women and gender diverse people were leading? Would we see change? And there are two ways to answer that question. The first is no, we would not necessarily see change. Because this is not cordial. You don't just add women and it all turns out a little bit sweeter. Just add women and expect them to operate to the same norms and the same standards, the same list of exactly what we expect of leadership. We're not going to see change. But add women and gender diverse people and people from diverse backgrounds and let them lead in the ways that they identify, the ways that they want to lead, the processes for change they believe in, then we have a shot at actually seeing something quite different. And again, the research backs this up as well. When women are given space to step out of their organisational norms and institutions and the places and they have time and space to identify how they want to do it, we see repeatedly that they consistently reject hierarchy, they value relationships and empowering others, they look to collaborate, they put effort into collective accountability and responsibility. And we also know that there is no one way of women leading, that in fact we see quite a diversity in the way that women and gender diverse people step into that leadership role. It's a way of working that values relationships, networks and collaboration, and at its best it uses those strategically. Now, relationships enable collaboration, and collaboration is the genesis of innovation. And we need innovation like never before when we're looking at the challenges of our biodiversity and our climate crisis. So women's leadership in all its many forms, from top down, bottom up, sideways, in all its diversity, and we know women lead in these different ways, this is an essential part of the solution to these crises we face. What's more, the evidence supports this hypothesis. There are numerous studies that show that more women in decision-making spaces equals better environmental outcomes. We see this in research across politics and government and business. The equation is very clear and simple. Now, one look around the world at the moment highlights that strongman, hero-led politics, business, government is not working out for our environment or climate anywhere. We need to fundamentally change this. So my question became, how can I be a part of making that happen? And happily, I have not had to answer that question alone. Years ago, I was involved in a project run by a group called Women's Environmental Leadership Australia. And they were running an annual leadership development program for women in the space. And I was very lucky enough to go through that in its first year in 2016. And I found the experience transformative for me and how I saw myself in this work. Wella was created by a group of women who are essentially the matriarchs of our movement, or the elders of our movement. They ran the campaign to save the Franklin. They were key to the founding of the Wilderness Society. They were key at the founding of Bush Heritage. And so many campaigns and organisations that we know and love and are proud of as environmental outcomes. Chances are you don't know their names because they're women. I sat down with them, and a couple of them are in the room today, and I do want to acknowledge you and your extraordinary leadership in making this possible, and to those of them online as well, thank you. I sat down and gave a little bit of a pitch and said, look, this work is amazing, but training 20 women a year, we know the scale of this challenge, we've got to go bigger. And in an extraordinary act of leadership right there and then, they put down their coffees and said, yeah, all right, let's do that. Now, these women have been working as volunteers with very, very limited funding to make this happen for several years, and yet, despite what would be enormous barriers in making this a reality, they saw a problem, they saw an opportunity, they knew they could do something about it, and they stepped up and straight into that space. And so together we've been working on a plan, and 18 months ago, we started expanding the work of Wella, and I'm thrilled to say to you today that we are an independent organisation and a growing community of women and gender diverse people across the country who are working to transform Australia's response to our environment and climate crises. And I invite you to join us in this challenge because it's something that we need to do together. We have a very clear plan for what we want to do and where we see our role. We see our work, while Wella grew, based in a pretty traditional space of working with women and gender diverse people in the NGO and the grassroots spaces. In the last couple of years, that has grown significantly, and we work and are very proud to work with people across all sectors, across local government, state and federal government agencies, and in the business and the corporate sector. Our strategy is focused on 4 key pillars for change, and those are empower, support, fund, and diversify. Now, Empower, that's our leadership development programs. We have a core program, it's very successful. We have way more people than can go through that program, apply every year. The message to us is clear. We need to do more of this work. We have just launched a new series of programs, starting with one in Queensland in May, and anyone online watching from Queensland, assuming you are not coping with other disasters right now, sign up, take a look and get involved. There are so many opportunities. We are hearing from some of your organisations about gaps or problems that you are seeing, and we would love to partner with you. So if that is something you want to explore, please do get in touch with us. It's something that's grown out of the alumni network itself. Because we know, and what we're hearing from our participants and our community, is that women want to lead with support networks around them. We look to those support networks for advice, for guidance, for backing us up, and because women's leadership is not just a question of confidence and skills, it's also about overcoming some really significant systemic barriers to leadership. And we need to take those on together. So we're investing in that support network, and we invite you all to join us in that process. It's a process of opening doors, is a concept that we've been exploring. How can we open doors to one another? Not just doors to new jobs or promotions, although that's obviously a part of it, but but new doors to new opportunities, to new ways of thinking, to new connections and friendships, because heck, this is hard work. Friendships matter. They keep us coming back. They reinvigorate us. And I know that you are sitting amongst friends here today. The third pillar is of fund. Again, this is not a barrier that most of us are unfamiliar with, and it's a problem across our entire movement. Only 2% of philanthropy in Australia goes to the climate crisis. Just let that sink in, just for a second. Look at what we're facing in New South Wales and Queensland right now, and 2% is going to our climate crisis. So we need to work together to think about how we increase funding into this space, but we know it's a particular barrier for women, particularly because many women do not have the networks and the access to networks that would fund their work, but also because a lot of the bottom-up grassroots work that many women-led organisations are interested in and are driving sometimes fails to attract particularly very traditional philanthropy that's still looking for top-down, sort of hero-led styles of campaigns. So how can we think about addressing that? We're launching a new giving circle that's going to invite people in to help fund direct grants to women-led organisations and projects for advocacy for our environment and climate, but in the structure of a giving circle that emphasises collaboration and relationships, and therefore brings not just a donation to the task, which is obviously very important, but brings networks and relationships and opportunities, and in its existence becomes an extension of that support network. And the final pillar is around diversity. And that is very much recognising we don't just need more white middle-class women like me in this work. We need leadership that reflects the full gamut of the Australian community. And there are absolutely additional barriers to the leadership of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women, women of colour, women from rural and regional communities, from working class backgrounds, women and gender diverse people with disabilities. This is the work we need to do to support them and hold them as they step forward into this and bring their own perspectives, their lessons, their view of the world into the leadership challenge. While this is a new journey for us, I'm also very thrilled to be able to say thus far it is working. The evaluations of our programs are not just showing quite a significant transformation in the confidence and the approach and the work of women and gender diverse people who've come through our programs, but then afterwards, we're seeing incredible outcomes that they are delivering in the real world for our environment. Wella alumni have gone on to stop a new coal mine in New South Wales, to stop dangerous new incinerators in Sydney's suburbs, to protect swathes of native forest in WA with the massive announcements that were made last year, to win legal protections through the courts in numerous jurisdictions for nature and for our climate. They've won climate emergency declarations through local government, and some of them have gone on to be elected to local government or to state government as a result of their own potential and the way that they wanted to lead. So now the question is to you all, to the sisterhood, and our brothers and allies sitting here amongst us. This revolution of leadership is ours for the making. It will not happen. It is not possible without us working together to make that happen for each other and for the many, many thousands, and dare I say even millions, of women and gender diverse people who are not in this room or who are not online with us today, but who are feeling the fire in their belly and the passion for change as strongly as you are. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on this after today and to think about what your role is into helping to make this a reality. You're about to hear from my fabulous colleague Lynn and a couple of other speakers, but when you return to your tables after that process, I do want to give you a little task. And that is to turn to the person next to you and immediately start this process of reflection by asking, what doors do you need opened for you to think about your leadership and how you can step forward and be powerful for our environment? And to reflect yourself, what do I need? what would help me? What would help me for myself? Or if you feel you're already standing on really solid ground, what would help you open those doors for somebody else? I am very excited about this work. This work is the work that fills my cup entirely. Standing in a room with you all helps do that further because it cements that I am working in a pretty extraordinary field of people with phenomenal women and men at our side making this change possible. I am so excited to continue working on this with you once we leave the room today, and I hope that you will join us in that challenge. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Vic. I'm already mentally starting to do my homework. It's now my pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Linh Do, Director of Leaders for Global Sustainability at the University of Melbourne and Director of National Partnerships at Climate Catalyst. Linh has worked at the intersection of grassroots movements, policy development and social enterprise to drive action on climate change for over a decade. She's passionate about achieving climate justice through connecting people and ideas. And when she's not doing that, she's just, casually hanging out with people like Al Gore. She's also currently a board member of Climate Action Network Australia. Prior to this, she was the Australia and Pacific lead for Al Gore's leadership program Climate Reality and covered international policy communication for the Paris Agreement through the Verb and has worked on energy efficiency with the United Nations Environment Program. Please make Linh welcome.
Good morning, everyone. It's so lovely to be here with you all this morning, to be reminded that I am much shorter than most people that I work with online. You normally wouldn't have known that if we were meeting on screens. I want to extend a really huge thanks to Bush Heritage Australia and Trust for Nature for having this event, for making it hybrid, for NAB for supporting the event. And it would be remiss of me not to note, as a new board member of the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, for their support in all of the people online. I feel like people have been waving in that direction, so hopefully I'm waving towards the right light there. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet this morning, the Wurundjeri people, and pay respects to elders past, present, and acknowledge any Indigenous or First Nations people that are in the room with us today. About 2 days ago, I was in another room, much smaller, much less buzz and excitement, but in that acknowledgement of country, the speaker talked about how for the last 40,000 plus years, arguably Aboriginal people could be considered one of the most sustainable societies that our civilization has ever seen. But look at how far we've strayed in the last 250 years. And as we celebrate International Women's Day today, start some of the homework that Vic's already set for us. I love homework as part of a speech. I think it's important that when we think about what does innovation or disruption look like, to actually take a moment and reflect and listen so that we're not always reinventing the wheel, but also listening to our elders, to people that have come before us, and think through what is it that we can take from these respective journeys and apply into how we think through what do we need to do for the people who are also yet to come. My name is Linh Do, and as per my bio, I have been telling people that I've been working on climate change for a decade, but in the way that some people celebrate the same age every single birthday, I think I have lost the ability to count, because I think I've been saying that for a fair few more years than 10. But nevertheless, who needs maths? My journey in figuring out that I could possibly even make a difference started when I was in high school. And unlike the school strikers out on the streets today, I was really into light bulbs and energy efficiency. I was definitely a super cool kid in school. But what that meant was, over the last decade, I've had the privilege and opportunity, particularly in the world before the pandemic, to travel and work overseas with organisations like the United Nations, but also, to go door knocking around Australia. And in that time, I tried often, and not gonna lie, failed many, many a times, to figure out how do I navigate this world and how do I potentially make a difference. And not gonna lie, it's been a pretty great journey, and I felt very fortunate. How lucky am I to be me? Only I sort of hate that word luck. And I know that we're, the lucky country, or it hasn't felt like that in Melbourne for a while, so like I get that. Maybe we're not quite there yet. But luck really implies that there's chance, there's circumstance, and dare I say, connections that enable things to happen. Rather than, as I'm sure even in some of the stories that you've already been sharing this morning, in some of what Vic was speaking to earlier, and the minister as well, is that those of us who are women or who identify as such know that we very rarely end up in positions of influence, let alone positions of power, by chance or by accident. It always requires a lot of hard work, a fair amount of tears, and for those who prefer it, alcoholic beverages or, the support of a community. And it also requires a willingness to push past some of the things that society tells us. And sometimes it's society at large and what we hear in the media. Sometimes it's people that are really close to us. And sometimes it's even ourselves. It's questions like, who are you to be here right now? What is it that you could possibly contribute? Why you? Why this issue? And unfortunately, self-doubt has been, maybe not even become, it feels like it's always been so synonymous with identifying as a woman. To be asking these questions of yourselves and to be wondering, who am I to be here? And I feel fortunate because somehow I was able to navigate through some of those questions and be here with all of you today. But I think as we evolve our understanding, but also our practice of feminisms and concepts like intersectionality, it's really important to recognise that the distance we have travelled is not always going to be the same. And whether that's geographically true or, true from the various other identities or backgrounds that we bring into this work, as I look around the room today, there's still some way to go. When I started on this journey, I remember walking into a room as a high school student and seeing no one that looked like me on so many different regards and measures. And even saying it now feels like a terrifying omission because it's years of pretending to fit in whatever way that means. So like being a very assertive person. For those of you who know me, I'm a very assertive person. I'm that person in the meeting rooms normally. But the reality is I grew up with parents who came to this country as refugees. They fled war. What's happening in Ukraine right now feels really personal, knowing what it means for people that are fleeing their homes and having to recreate entire new lives, but trying to cling on to a past that obviously means so much. Growing up, it meant that we didn't speak English at home. And to this day, and it could be just a reflection of my language skills, I have not found a translation for the word activism in either Vietnamese or Chinese. And my parents, they grew up in a place where activism, or even advocacy, like a much more tame and acceptable version of how you can create a difference and make change, could and still does land you in jail, rightly or wrongly. So it's not really an understatement to say that they have spent large parts of this last decade really worrying that anytime I went to work, I might not return home. I have received a number of phone calls in my lifetime being like, hey, I saw this protest on TV and I think you're also in that country right now. So are you in jail? Is a voicemail message my mum leaves me. Every 2 to 3 years I get that. But the other reason why I feel fortunate, despite having navigated some of those challenges and, unfortunately still navigate those challenges today, is that it's pretty great to wake up, albeit this morning was a particularly early wake up, and know that I get to do this work and know that there's something that I'm particularly passionate about, addressing the climate crisis, the greatest moral issue of our generation. What a mouthful. It's something that the world needs a ton of collaboration and effort on. It's something that I have some degree of skill in, and amazingly, I've been able to find ways so that I can pay bills and do that work. Just how fortunate am I? Only this week it's been really hard to feel fortunate, and it's been really hard to be like, woo, I am ready for yet another day of this. And some of that has been because, I did start to count, and I realised that it's been a little bit more than a decade, and what that means is that it's been over half of my life doing this work, and it both feels like a privilege to get to wake up every morning and do that, but it also means I didn't get to pursue my dreams of becoming an Olympian or, a career in musical theatre because of this climate thing. So as I start to ponder, retirement, is that ever going to come? Because how could it when you look around the world and there's so many different issues and things that we could be tackling and focusing on. I know that all of the speakers this morning in some way have referenced, obviously, what's happening in Ukraine. To see the way that power really can get misused and abused. We're still coming out of lockdown. You know, being in this room with you genuinely is very exciting. I think as all the speakers were saying, I was like, oh yeah, there's people. And then I'm like, there's so many of you. I don't know, look around, there's a lot. And that's just some of the news before even getting to what's happening when it comes to climate change. And climate change isn't that thing where, you know, every now and then it pops up in the media. Every day it feels like there's something new. And it can feel really relentless. On Monday, I learned that a really long-time friend of mine lost their house due to the flooding. Only in 2011, they lost their family home to the flooding. You know, to have that happen 2 times in the span of actually over a decade in that case. On Tuesday, despite knowing what the IPCC report was going to say, I obviously very reasonably stayed up and doom scrolled through the report. And I think Vic was right. It didn't tell us anything that we didn't already know, and especially with the caveat of we didn't already know in order to compel a conviction that is needed on the level of action that is required. And are starting to become real. And it's not in 2030, this is likely to happen. It's actually in 2022, these things are already happening. At this moment in time, in this shared moment of our human history, this story that actually we are writing ourselves, 50% of the world's planet could be said to be on the front lines of climate change. No longer is being on the front lines of climate change an image that you might see, you know, in an organisation saying, here's why you should donate, here's why you should contribute and stand in solidarity. It's actually our neighbours up north in the Torres Strait who might lose connection to their cultural heritage. To think that that current trajectory isn't where we're headed because of the work that all of us are doing, which is amazing. But I guess today, and normally I'm not this sombre, so it actually even feels weird to look at the notes that I've written. Because I know that the norm when we get together is obviously to celebrate and recognise all of the really great work that's going on, and I definitely don't want to be underplaying any of that or any of the efforts that we're putting in. But blimey, it has been hard, and sometimes it is okay to take a moment and just say, this sort of really sucks. I don't even have words to be articulate about it. Like, it just is really hard. In the way that sometimes the work that women do in society doesn't necessarily get recognised, whether that's in, you know, our awards systems or in the media or, you know, in the roles that they might deserve in big lights. There's work that women have historically and traditionally and still continue to do that I think is really important, and it's all of that invisible labour around making sure people are okay. Are you okay today to be here at this meeting? How are you feeling? What's going on at home? You know, it's those questions that sometimes get really underplayed and undervalued. And I guess as much as I'm excited and very eager to get started with Vic's revolution, it's also probably worth noting, Vic and I have known each other, I actually think, for a real almost decade, despite my maths. So much of what we think is really aligned. And as Vic was speaking, I was like, oh yeah, I think I was going to say that. Anyway, is actually, how do we all give pause to the fact that things have been hard, and honestly, things will only continue to get harder. And if that's the case, a privilege, and I feel fortunate to get hard. What does it look like to actually do something really radically different and stop for a moment and be with, in addition to what are the things that we could be doing differently to care for planet and to care for people? What would that also look like if we actually just extended a little bit of that grace to ourselves as well and asked us, what do I need in order to actually show up today for my community and for the world around us? Thank you.
We're inviting our speakers back to the stage. I think we have time for a couple of questions. So if you have... How's that? Oh, It's on, excellent. So does anyone have a burning question? I think we probably have time for 2, maybe 3, depending on how long the question is and how snappy the answers are. Does anyone have a question? Because if not, then I'll ask loads of questions. Yes, we have one over there. So our handy people with the mic. Excellent.
Thank you. Oh. Great. Nope. Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Cool. Sorry. Hi, I'm Bernadette Thomas. I manage the Sustainable Environment Department at Hume City Council, and I'm also a councillor at Maribyrnong and a Weller alumni of 2017. Thank you for your presentations. Vic, I've heard you talk before about hope and what keeps you hopeful. So I'm interested to hear from you and Lynn about what does keep you hopeful for that massive change that you've both kind of referred to that we need.
Thanks, Bernadette, and a great week to be talking about hope, hey? I mean, this is going to sound like a total cliche, but to be honest, I think hope starts in spaces like this because it starts with connection. And for me, I find a lot of hope in the work that is happening in communities, in when I look around and I see the amount of work happening here and the opportunities that are sparked by those connections. Because this kind of change, it's not coming top down. It's not. We've been waiting. We've been calling. We've protested. I've stood in how many protests, how many changes have we tried to drive, waiting for that top-down change to happen. It's not going to come in that way. This is going to be a messy transformation, but it is one we've got to create. And so those connections where you see those sparks happening and you see the opportunities, that is entirely what gives me hope. Because change is also non-linear. And I think that's the other part to remember. We can't just look at where we are and therefore traject forward and think, oh God, is that going to happen within the timeframes we need? Change is messy, but it also builds momentum. And I'm a huge believer in momentum as a part of hope and also as a part of change. So that's absolutely where I get mine from.
Lynn, what gives you hope?
Is my microphone on? It is. I always have to check. So, like I said, I really think Vic and I think very similarly on things, so I want to echo everything she just said there. But I also think that when we practice and think through what does it mean to be hopeful, is it's not this abstracted thing, but there's a whole bunch of muscles that we can flex around, like resiliency, around patience, tenacity, grit, and just giving things yet another go. And for me, there's a real hope of, that moment when you're learning how to ride your bike and you fall over, hundreds of times in my case, but then eventually you figure it out. And I think hope is really similar, or at least for me, how I sustain my hope in that process of figuring out how I make a change is that even if it doesn't work the first time round, what can I take from that and learn in order to apply to the next time I'm going to give it a go again. And surrounding yourself by people, I find to be the easiest solution to hope. And I think that was why COVID was so hard, was because, some of us were either living alone or in various forms of isolation, just with our little pod, and you forgot that actually you have neighbours and you have other people and other reasons to be hopeful, because it's not just you by yourself.
Can I add one more
Sure.
comment to that, which is, Lynn, you touched on this, but the quality of being active in that hope. And many of you, but perhaps not everyone, will be familiar with the work of Rebecca Solnit, who's an American writer, and she wrote this phenomenal book called Hope in the Dark. And if you are needing a shot and an injection of hope in this, get it, read it. It's available as an ebook online. And she has a line, which I will massacre here, but about how hope is not... You need to be very active in that process. It's not just an emergency sort of that you call an emergency line and hope someone's going to get you out of it. You have to get up, grab the axe, smash down the door and get out of that building. That's where hope comes from. It's not just that there's an axe on the door. You've got to grab it and use it. And so you've got to get active in this work if you want to be hopeful. And I have seen this play out. When I was working at the ACF years ago, and there was one of the first big waves of coral bleaching happening, I started fielding a lot of phone calls from really distressed volunteers, staff members, people around our network who were really, really struggling with what was going on. And I couldn't understand at that time why I was faring so much better than them, until I realised all of them were working from home or by themselves and not actually active in their volunteering at the time. And so they were reading this in the newspaper and they had no way of connecting or talking to someone about it. The connection and getting active are these essential ingredients in hope.
Actually, it's a fitting thing. Say that book title and author again.
So Rebecca Solnit is the writer, and the book is Hope in the Dark.
Because funnily enough, today actually is International Book Day. So I'll add another one, Julia Baird's book, Phosphorescence. It has a nice bit of, the importance of contact with nature for resilience. And I think the subtitle's something like, finding your inner glow or inner light in dark times. That actually is all we've got time for, one and only question. But I think that, we've all had so much passion and been busting to say so much because we haven't seen each other in so long. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our two speakers, Linh Do and Victoria McKenzie-McHarg. Now, you can stay on stage. I won't sort of get you to awkwardly go, but as we invite our next speaker to the stage, I'm going to just quickly, Wella is online on social media. Vic, tell us what accounts we should look for. Who should we follow?
You can find Wella on Twitter, as well as on LinkedIn and Facebook. Insta is on its way.
TikTok?
You're so cutting edge, Tanya.
Not yet. I don't know how to use TikTok yet, but I plan to. I'm now delighted to introduce our final speaker before we draw the prizes. I'd like to hand over to Bush Heritage CEO Heather Campbell to close today's event. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Tanya. Listening to that music, I'm thinking I don't like some really good heavy metal, but maybe that's a little bit of my psychology. And it's about taking that axe and bashing down the door. I'd like to start off by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're on, the Wurundjeri people, the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognise that we're meeting here as a group in a meeting place where they would be meeting too, on the banks of this amazing river out here. And acknowledge that they have had 60,000 years of actively managing this land. And it's only now that so many of us are starting to learn so much from them and how we actually work together in the face of climate change. Obviously, my heart also goes out to those in the Ukraine, to those in Brisbane, in Queensland, and down in New South Wales, as the impacts of the floods are having such a devastating impact across our country. It's amazing that we're here. This is super cool. Okay, I did have that little bit of a shaky moment of, there's so much of us, and then a couple of us looked at me, excuse me, oh, stuff it, we'll give each other a hug. And then I also thought, well, if I get COVID, 7 days of not having to traipse kids around everywhere is actually sort of cool. But I don't obviously want to get it, and I hope everybody's feeling comfortable and safe. And thank you for those that are joining us online. We know that you're from all over the country. I want to do a huge shout out to Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage, the board members and management, current and past, because I know we've got lots in the room, for actually having the vision to have this event and start it 11 years ago and to continue it on and to recognise the power of bringing people together. This is fantastic. Thank you to Tanya, to our amazing sponsors, the NAB, the Lord Mayor's Charitable Foundation, and everybody that has been able to come together. It is great to see so many, and I've got my reading glasses on, so I have to take them off so I can see you all, to see so many coming together, so many women, so many men, so many of different demographics of ages. It is great to see people in school uniforms, so shout out to the Eltham College ladies over there. To see those that of us have come together and recognise the power of coming together. I'd just like to pick up a couple of the comments from Lynn and Victoria about get active. And that's what a whole lot of us in this room are about, and comments made by the Minister too about how we can actually take action here in Victoria. And we've had a couple of crazy years, and it looks like our world's not going to get any less crazy anytime soon. but we know that if we get active, we can actually make a difference. Also picking up some of the other things was reflecting on is about collaboration. A whole lot of us here work together, and I can see so many more conversations that are occurring and connections that means that we'll be even more active together. It's about what will we do to help open the doors for each other so that we can actually lead in the way that we want to lead. We're all different, we all have amazing ways of interacting, so giving ourselves the freedom to do that and collaborate. So I'm really looking forward to this year. From a Bush Heritage perspective, we're pretty excited. Last year we launched our 2030 strategy because we said, look, the world is going crazy, we're living climate change now, we have to do more. So our strategy is about deepening and doubling our impact by 2030. And we can't do that alone. We're stupid to think we can. We actually need all of us working together to be able to have that impact around Australia, to have it for us, our generation, and for all the future generations. So I'm really looking forward to working together, looking forward to having so many more conversations, to be able to meet you in this wonderful 3 dimensions. It's also great to know that we all have pants that aren't tracksuits or shorts. Because I don't know about you, but I sort of got used to dressing from waist up for Zoom meetings. So really looking forward to how we continue these conversations, how we open the doors, how we connect, how we collaborate, and have that sense of hope. Because even though it can be really depressing if you sit in a dark room, I know with human nature that if we come together, we work together across all of the amazing diversity and learn from the traditional owners of this land, we have a bright future. Thank you so much for coming and joining us this morning. I wish you the best with the rest of your week and the days and the months ahead. Please stick around if you can, because this is pretty special that there's so many of us here. And if you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable, there's amazing environment outside and it's not raining, so we're pretty lucky here in Victoria. Hang around, have conversations. But I know there's some fairly important prizes to draw, and because everybody a level of excitement, if by some miracle my name's pulled out, please destroy that and pull out somebody else's. But over to you, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Heather. And I do have some prizes to read out, so I will let Lynn and Vic escape so they don't feel like they're sitting there awkwardly. So now, who wants to know who's won the door prizes? Okay, drum roll. Prize 1, from Sense of Self, a bath pass, so sounds nice and day spa. That actually has been won by someone in our online audience, Tamsin Hogarth from Wildlife Victoria. Congratulations, Tamsin. So I'll just put that in my back pocket and we'll find a way to get that to you eventually somehow. No, we will. Yes. Prize number 2, from the Odd Frog, an accommodation voucher. Okay, let's get the excitement up. Table 30, someone from Environmental Justice Australia, Charlie Brumby Rendell. So you can come on down and grab that when we finish. And prize number 3, Riversdale Retreat accommodation voucher. Ooh, this is at table 33. Alison Oldfield from Greenfleet. So I'll hand those to you in a moment. So I'll hang on to those and you'll definitely get those from me because you're in the same room. Don't worry, Tamsin, we will get yours to you. Okay, and a big thank you to Odd Frog and Sense of Self and Riversdale Retreat for donating these fantastic prizes. Finally, each of our tables has a lovely kangaroo paw centrepiece, and they're also prizes. So if you have a coloured sticker on the back of your place card, then you have also won this beautiful native plant. If you missed out, you'll have once more to win. Bit of buzz and excitement. Now, there are going to be more prizes, so if we can have a quiet for the last little bit. There are going to be more prizes, so if you feel like you've missed out, then you'll have the opportunity to win other prizes by completing the event feedback survey, which you'll receive later today. We like that. So that draws to a close this morning's formalities. We thank everyone for their attendance, and a special thank you again to Victoria and Lynn for your wonderful presentations. Now, don't forget that while formalities are concluding, we have set aside 30 minutes extra in the venue for additional networking, so please feel free to stick around, have a coffee and get to know each other over a cuppa. But first, take up a few minutes to take up Victoria's challenge, discuss at your tables what you're going to do next, what you need, what you can offer, and how you're going to be part of the action. Thanks again for coming and joining us this morning, and we look forward to seeing you next year. Have a good day.